Today's lesson is air travel complications. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be traveling by air. We're going to be taking a plane someplace. But, of course, sometimes it isn't always as smooth as we'd like it to be. We're going to be talking about some complications that might occur if you're traveling. And, yes, indeed, lots of people want to travel and getting to the airport and checking in your baggage and waiting in line at customs and all those sorts of things can be very long and complicated. So, yes, indeed, it's not that simple to go traveling these days, especially if you're going overseas, and you might encounter some of these complications.
That's right. Now, we all want a smooth trip, but when complications arrive, it can be very stressful. And added to that stress, if you're in another country and you're trying to get help in a foreign language, that can make it even worse. So today and tomorrow, we're going to be looking at a couple of fairly common situations. Day one especially, we're going to be looking at arriving late for a flight or problems at check-in. And then day two will be a little bit more unusual for most travelers, these problems, but maybe there's a problem on the plane with a dietary problem. Maybe you can't eat certain foods, or perhaps even an in-flight health issue, having some health emergency while on the plane. All of these situations, although some of them might be rarer than others, can be very stressful. So we're going to help you figure out how to communicate in these situations. So let's check out our first dialogue. It's all about a late arrival. Air travel complications. 1. A late arrival. Gina gets stuck in traffic on her way to the airport and rushes to the check-in counter for her flight to New York.
Hi, I'm here to check in for my flight to New York.
I'm sorry, but you're too late to board. Please bear in mind that we recommend passengers arrive at least 2 hours before takeoff.
I just encountered unexpected traffic on the way to the airport. Is there anything you can do?
I can put you on standby for the next flight, but there will be additional charges.
Okay, please do that. Here's my passport and credit card. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome. I'll get you sorted for the next available flight.
大家好，第一部分我们来看标题中的单字 complication。它是名词，表示使复杂化的难题或困难、疑难杂症，也可以是混乱的意思。例如 The group members are arguing with each other about how to solve this complication. 小组成员正为如何解决这个难题而吵个没完。又或者是 We've had one complication after another with moving, and it's driving me crazy. 我们在搬家的过程中遇到了一个又一个的麻烦，我都快要发疯了。接着看到 recommend 这个动词，意思是建议或是推荐。例如 I recommend the gym in my neighborhood because it has great equipment and is open 24/7. 我推荐我家附近的健身房，因为它设备很好，而且24小时开放。又或者说Patrick's doctor recommended that he take vitamin D because he doesn't spend enough time in the sun. Patrick 的医生建议他服用维生素 D， 因为他在阳光下待得不够久。再来是名词 take off， 它表示起飞、升空或是出发。例如 Before takeoff, the flight attendants made sure passengers had fastened their seatbelts. 起飞前，空服员确认乘客都系上了安全带。又或者说We can watch a live stream of the rocket takeoff on the big screen. 我们可以在大萤幕上看火箭升空直播。
Okay, so in our first conversation for today, we've got Gina, and she's talking to the check-in agent, and we're specifically focusing on a late arrival. This can happen if you're trying to get to the airport, and you might get stuck in traffic or whatever. You might get there too late for your flight. Hey, what happens? Are they going to send you home and say, sorry, you missed your flight, you can't have your trip, forget about it, maybe try again next year? But no, there are other things that can be done, and we'll find out what happens here in the first conversation. conversation. Gina gets stuck in traffic on her way to the airport and rushes to the check-in counter for her flight to New York. So again, if you're in Taiwan here and you're trying to get to the airport, you might encounter a traffic jam on the freeway heading out there. What can you do? You can't just get out and walk the rest of the way. You might be late for your flight. And of course, when she gets to the airport, finally, she rushes to the check-in counter. Maybe she thinks she can still make her flight to New York.
Being late for a plane will definitely qualify as an air travel complication. We should mention a complication. This is a noun form. When we use the adjective form complicated, we're talking about something that is more difficult, more challenging than you thought, not as easy or as straightforward as simple as you thought. And complications are often unexpected, unforeseen things that happen to make what could be a fairly simple job or a fairly simple activity more difficult. If you're going out for dinner on a Saturday night and you can't find parking anywhere, that could be a big complication. You might be late for the movie you want to see. You might not make your reservation time for dinner. So adding in those extra wrinkles or problems or challenges or complications can make simple things hard. And yeah, that's why it's always a good idea to get to the airport early, because if you arrive late, you might definitely face some pretty serious complications. Let's hope Gina gets through this. It begins with Gina probably rushing up and kind of breathlessly saying, "Hi, I'm here to check in for my flight to New York." She's probably like that because she was rushing in from the taxi or from the train or bus that got her to the airport, and she knows she's late, so there's no time to waste right now. So she wants to check in for her flight, and she's probably crossing her fingers and toes.
Well, here's what the check-in agent has to tell her. "I'm sorry, but you're too late to board." Okay, so oftentimes, yeah, it's too bad she missed her flight there. They'll have like a last call for a certain flight, and of course they have a list of all the passengers, and if that passenger has not boarded yet, maybe they'll make an announcement. "Will Gina please report to gate 37 for your flight to New York?" But maybe they made that announcement already and she did not show up. She was still stuck in traffic. So it's too late. They close the door and the plane is leaving the gate and getting ready to take off. And yes, indeed, it's too late to board. The agent goes on to say, "Please bear in mind that we recommend passengers arrive at least 2 hours before takeoff." So he's basically telling her that, yeah, next time you try to catch a flight, try to get there at least 2 hours before your plane takes off, just to be on the safe side. And you need to bear this in mind. To bear something in mind just means to remember this, to not forget it.
Yes, and if you recommend something, this is what you suggest. This is your best advice. This is what you think another person should do because you would do it in that situation. So that's what we suggest. Of course, if you can't make it, that might be okay, but you definitely have to be there a little bit early. But what they suggest or recommend is be 2 hours early or 2 hours before takeoff, because it will take you some time to check in, to go through security, to go through customs, to go through duty-free and buy something if that's what you like to do. And of course, there are always delays because other people might have issues or problems. So it's always a good idea to arrive 2 hours before takeoff. When the plane leaves the ground, that is technically takeoff, but they could also call takeoff from when they close the doors of the plane gets pushed back from the airport and starts to roll towards the runway. But takeoff is literally when the plane is flying down, or not flying, is moving very quickly down the runway, and eventually it starts to fly, and when it leaves the ground, the plane has taken off. That is takeoff. So get there 2 hours before the plane is scheduled to leave, in other words. Now, Gina, she had a bit of a problem.
Yeah, she says, "I just encountered unexpected traffic on the way to the airport." So she was probably expecting traffic to be reasonably smooth. Yeah, maybe there'd be some slow going here and there, but more or less she'd be able to get to the airport on time. But unfortunately, there were some unexpected traffic problems. Maybe there was a couple of accidents that held things back or whatever, and there was a big traffic jam and nobody was getting anywhere. And so that's what she encountered. She came across this problem, and then she has a question. "Is there anything you can do? Now, I missed my flight. Is there something you can do? Can you put me on another flight? Can you call the captain and say, 'Come back, Gina's here. She needs to get on the plane.' Yeah, what is there that you can do for me?"
Yes, exactly. So that extra extra traffic, that unexpected traffic was definitely the complication that she didn't need. Well, what can the check-in agent do? The check-in agent does have one suggestion. I can put you on standby for the next flight, but there will be additional charges. So there will be another plane leaving, hopefully later today or possibly even tomorrow. And Gina will be on standby for that flight. So that gives us the idea that the next flight is full. It's already completely booked up. There are no available seats. So she is on a waiting list. Being on standby at an airport is basically like being on a waiting list anywhere else. They will ask you to stand by as they are loading the plane with people. You have to be there at the airport, not just sitting in your hotel room or at home. And basically, if someone doesn't show up, if they cancel their ticket or for whatever reason can't travel that day, you get their seat. You are first in line. You are in standby. You are on this waiting list. And if there's a passenger or two on standby for a flight, you might have a reasonable chance of getting on that plane. But if it's backed up and there's 40 people on standby, I don't think you're going to get on that plane today. And of course, if you are on standby in this situation, there will be extra or additional charges. You'll have to pay a little bit more because you've been silly, you missed your plane, we have to reorganize lots of things, so it's going to cost you a bit of money.
Right, and she could have been unreasonable. What? What do you mean extra charges? I just need a flight. You know, I missed my first one. That's not my fault because the traffic was so bad. But here we can see that Gina is actually being very reasonable. She knows that it does happen sometimes that you might miss your flight and that you might have to take a later flight and that it's possible that you'll have to pay additional charges. She says, okay, please do that. Put me on the next flight and I'm really willing to pay that extra fee. It's okay with me. Here's my passport and credit card. I know you're going to need those things. The credit card, of course, is to pay those extra fees. And, of course, you need your passport if you're traveling, especially overseas. Thank you for your help, she says. And, of course, the agent says, you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then adds, I'll get you sorted for the next available flight. Get you sorted is kind of get you organized, get you all set, get you all ready for the next available flight. And we imagine that at this point, there's a lot of as the check-in agent is tapping away at the computer, reorganizing things to get Gina on standby for that next flight when hopefully there will be a seat for her and she will get to her destination a little bit late, but successfully. All right, that's it for our first dialogue. Let's look at part 2. It's a problem at check-in, and hopefully this doesn't involve Gina again. 2. A problem at check-in. Gina proceeds to the check-in counter for the later flight to New York. Good afternoon, miss. Do you have any baggage to check in today?
No, I only have this carry-on.
I'm sorry, but your carry-on seems to exceed the size limit. I'm afraid it will need to be checked in.
Oh, I didn't realize it was too big. Sure, I'll check it in then.
Also, please ensure that items like lighters, power banks, and lithium batteries aren't inside your bag, as they're not permitted in checked baggage.
Got it. I'll double check. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
第二部分先介绍 proceed， 它是动词，意思是朝某个方向前进，继续进行或是接下来做。例如 After the film ended, the audience proceeded towards the exits of the theater. 电影结束后，观众陆陆续续走向戏院出口。这边补充动词 process， P-R-O-C-E-S-S process， 它指的是处理资料或是讯息等，也可以是加工的意思。我们可以说 This computer model can process information much faster than earlier ones. 这个型号的电脑处理资料的速度可以比之前的快许多。也可以说 They processed the freshly harvested wheat into flour. 他们把新收割的小麦加工成面粉。接着是单字 exceed， 这个动词的意思是超过、超出或是超越。例如 You should be careful when you drive and never exceed the speed limit. 驾驶时你应该要小心且切勿超速。又或者说 The developer exceeded the original budget for the new sports arena. 开发商超出了那座新体育场原本的预算。另外补充单字 exceedingly， E-X-C-E-E-D-I-N-G-L-Y exceedingly， 它是副词，指的是非常的或是极度的。举例来说 Peter has very few friends because he's exceedingly introverted in social situations. Peter 只有极少朋友，因为他在社交场合都非常内向。也可以说 We had an exceedingly good trip during this long vacation. 在这个长假中，我们度过了一次非常愉快的旅行。最后介绍 battery 这个名词，它有电池或是电瓶的意思。举例来说 My phone battery is almost dead, so I have to hang up. 我的手机快没电了，所以我得挂电话了。再看一个例子 Wireless headphones can have a battery life of anywhere from 2 to 40 hours. 无线耳机的电池续航力可达2至40小时。
Okay, so Gina has already had one problem arriving late to the airport. Now she's going to have a problem at check-in.
Oh, no.
Check-in means you present your documents, and then they give you your boarding pass, and then you check in your luggage, and then they tell you can go ahead. And Gina proceeds to the check-in counter for the later flight to New York. So she has made this arrangement. Of course, the check-in agent did some things for her, arranged her details to get on the following flight or the next flight for New York. So she goes ahead and moves toward the check-in counter. If you proceed or proceed to, that means you just go in that direction. You go on with the next task.
Exactly right. So, good afternoon, miss. Do you have any baggage to check in today? This is what the check-in agent says to Gina on this day. So does she have any baggage to check in? This would be baggage that you would want to put under the airplane. You give it to the airline workers. They will store it for you under the airplane. And then when you get to your destination, they will get it out and it will appear on that sort of circular carousel that luggage comes out on. You'll pick it up and off you go. So this is especially if you're traveling for a longer period of time. You need to bring more stuff with you. Gina, it seems, is only going for a short period of time, or she's just a very light traveler. She says, no, I have no baggage to check in today. And she adds, I only have this carry-on. What exactly is a carry-on, Roger?
Well, it's a small piece of luggage or a small suitcase or something, and you can take it on the plane with you and put it in the overhead storage bin. And lots of people travel lightly because they don't want to bother with checking in luggage. They just want to get in the plane and get out and get to their destination. Maybe they're on a business trip or something like that, and they don't need a lot of stuff. So she only has a carry-on, something that she can carry on to the plane. And the agent says, I'm sorry, but your carry-on seems to exceed the size limit. Indeed, there is a limit to the size of the carry-on. They also will limit the weight as well, but they have limitations on both the dimensions of the actual article, whether it be one of those small suitcases with wheels or whatever. They need to have certain specifications for those pieces of luggage. And also, they cannot be too heavy. In this particular case, though, the carry-on exceeds the size limit. To exceed just means to go beyond something, to go beyond a limitation.
So there you go. It exceeds the size limit. In other words, it's too big to put under the seat in front of you on the airplane. That's usually the size limit. You can often measure your bags at check-in to see if it will fit in that small space in the plane or if you will need to check it in. But yeah, try not to break the rules on this. It'll just end up delaying the plane and all the other passengers as well as yourself. So she's going to have to check this in. This does not qualify as a carry-on bag. The check-in agent says, I'm afraid it will need to be checked in. Gina says, oh, I didn't realize it was too big. Maybe it's a new suitcase or something like that. She's never traveled with it before, or maybe just she looked at it, didn't bother to exactly measure it, and it turns out, yeah, it's a bit too big. Sure, she says, not making a big fuss. I'll check it in then. No problem. I understand it exceeds the size limit. I can't carry it on. I guess I'll have to check it. But before she does that, the check-in agent wants to make sure that there's nothing dangerous inside the bag.
Right. The agent says, also, please ensure that items like lighters, power banks, and lithium batteries aren't inside your bag, as they're not permitted in checked baggage. So I've heard these limitations before. A lighter here is referring to a cigarette lighter if people are still smoking. We've got power banks, which of course will power your devices. And we've got lithium batteries, which are batteries that are made from lithium. They're more common these days. They're rechargeable. They're more convenient. But for some reason, they might cause problems if they're inside of checked baggage. So yeah, they can't be inside the bag. They're not permitted in checked baggage. So yeah, you've got to make sure that you don't have those things inside your luggage.
There might be a risk of fire from some of these items, and of course having them under the plane where people can't see them and react if there is smoke or fire, that could be very dangerous. So Gina says, got it, I understand. I'll double check. I'll go through my bag and all the little pockets on the outside, make sure there are no power banks, lithium batteries, lighters, things like that. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And the check-in agent wraps it up by saying, you're welcome. And then I'm sure he'll be getting Gina's boarding pass to her and taking Gina's bag to check it in. And pretty soon, Gina will be on her way to get on the plane. Finally.
Yep, to New York. Okay, so she's going to be flying all the way to New York City. And she's probably going to be late for her business meeting or whatever. But I'm sure she can call ahead and tell people that's the situation. And they'll understand these things can happen sometimes. Unfortunately, though, sometimes when you're flying someplace, you have connecting flights that you might miss because your original flight was delayed for whatever reason. I was delayed in Pittsburgh one time and had to reschedule my forwarding flights to Des Moines, where I was going to visit some family members there. But that's another story. But of course, this might happen to you. So be prepared. These things can happen all the time. That brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在课文第一部分的对话里， Gina 在前往机场的路上遇到塞车，结果她太晚到而无法登机。那报到柜台人员对她说， Please bear in mind that we recommend passengers arrive at least 2 hours before takeoff. 请记住，我们建议乘客至少在起飞前2小时抵达。好，那首先要介绍的重点是 bear in mind， 这表示放在心上，记得或是牢记的意思。动词 bear 也可以用 keep 代换，那它的用法就是 bear something in mind 或者是 keep something in mind。那也可以用 bear in mind 或是 keep in mind 后面加上 that 子句。举例来说， I'll definitely bear your advice in mind。我一定会把你的忠告牢记在心。那再看一个例句是 Keep in mind that your health is more important than anything else. 请记得你的健康比其他任何事物还重要。好，那这边顺便补充2个跟动词 bear 相关的片语。第一个是 bear fruit， 动词 bear 它可以表达产生或者是结果实的那个结，那么 bear fruit 字面意思就是结成果实，可以引申表达事情有了成果奏效。好，那么第二个补充的是 bring something to bear， 这个惯用语表示施以影响、应用或者是实行运用，可以用来表达运用力量啊、压力或影响力等等来完成某事，或者是使某人做某事。后面可以接 on somebody or something 去带出影响的对象，或者是应用在什么方面。举例来说 bring pressure to bear on the government 就可以表达对政府来施压、施加压力的意思。好，另外课文用到名词 take off， 它有起飞、升空或出发的意思。我们把 take 和 off 拆开变成片语动词 take off， 它可以当不及物用去表达飞机起飞，像是 The plane took off half an hour ago， 飞机在半小时前起飞了。好，那顺便也补充一下 take off 做不及物用的其他意思哦。第一个也可以用来指说蓬勃发展，突然开始走红成功，就像我们中文一样也会用起飞来描述事业成功嘛，那 take off 就可以表达可能像事业啊、产品或想法等等迅速成长、大获成功。举例来说 At age 16, her singing career took off. 她16岁的时候歌唱事业开始起飞。第二个呢，我们可以用 take off 表达匆匆离去、突然离开，像是 He took off without saying goodbye。 他没说再见就突然离开了。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Complication. The construction project was delayed due to a series of complications. Recommend. I recommend reading the novel before watching the movie to fully understand the plot. Proceed. Please proceed to the waiting area and wait there until your name is called. Exceed. Owen exceeded the speed limit last week, so he got a traffic ticket. Battery. Since the battery in my flashlight was low, the light was dim and barely visible in the dark.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.